What do you mean, too drunk? It's not possible.
Hey, Kilted Warrior here. Hope you're having a great day. Remember to subscribe if you enjoy the video, and if you would like to see more videos covering Baldurs Gate, Elder Scrolls, Mass Effect and Starfield, be sure to check out the channel. Otherwise, join me as we review Baldurs Gate 3. Combat and gameplay mechanics. So when you're playing Baldur's Gate 3, there are a few key parts to gameplay that are at the core of the experience, like with any role-playing game, those being turn-based combat and the progression systems, ranging from gear to the all-important leveling up of your team. Turn-based combat. So for Baldur's Gate 3, it uses a turn-based combat system for those times when your silver-tongued devil won't quite cut it. And no, there is no real time of pause here. And yes, I played through Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 a month before this release, and no, I will not say which I prefer. I know better than to delve into that controversial topic. Anyway, the framework of combat is an interesting one that will encourage experimentation. You see, though the game is based on D&D 5th edition rules, it's more accurate to say it is inspired by them. For that, I humbly suggest taking a look at Solasta. Of course, I don't play D&D, and I imagine most players of Baldur's Gate 3 don't either. But needless to say, there are those more knowledgeable, and they indicate that Solasta is the gold standard by the book 5th edition, and Baldur's Gate 3 is an extensive homebrew and takes plenty of liberties. It does work though, so the rules of combat are you have resources each turn, those being actions, bonus actions, reactions and movement, as well as spell slots and other class-specific consumable points, as it were, for particular actions. As a whole, it makes for an engaging tactical experience with plenty of flair, with some good animation work, and the fact that the game simply loves for you to fling things off edges, usually triggering my save scum reflex. Seriously, there is one enemy later on that I won't show due to possible spoilers, but know that it loves to use a roaring thunder arrow which knocks back your team, and they always know exactly where to shoot to instantly kill several teammates by launching them into the instant death hazard. Basically, the game rewards good positioning but horribly punishes bad positioning, as the AI loves to use shove as much as you do. I can only assume this was conjured from a dev with a sadistic fantasy. That is, they're one of those DMs who deliberately set out to kill players, with unavoidable hazards they conjure in their sick minds. That said, there is something about slicing an enemy with a sword and then following up by shoving them off a cliff. So you have the use of actions for your attacks and spells largely, as well as bonus actions such as shove, jump, and several utility spells, combined with maps that tend to have elevation and hazards, as well as the ability to create your own hazards at will. You have some really interesting combos for some great encounters. Also, watching your enemies and your own team helplessly slip on ice or grease never gets old. Aside from that, this game deserves to be noted for its reaction system, which wasn't originally in the early access until later on, and for me was a great inclusion. I know not all players like the reaction system, but I for one love its implementation here. You see, you get one reaction per turn usually, with some natural exceptions, and involves your character responding to an action of another character, enemy or ally. This can be shielding an ally to help them avoid an enemy attack when they're nearby. It can also be a riposte when an enemy misses you. You can have self-shielding spells. You can even change the dice roll in the case of a divination wizard. And of course my favourite being the counter spell. because nothing establishes Gale's wizard dominance like intercepting a fireball and saying, "Nah, I don't think so." What's great about actions is they can be toggled, so you can either have it automatic, turned off, or have it ask you each time. And in that case, it will tell you every action your characters or other characters can take, and you can pick between them, even if in this case it is two reactions doing a similar thing. Naturally, sometimes you'll choose one over the other, but sometimes you might get some interesting combos. For example, with Karlach, she might miss a killing strike, but that's no problem if you have the use of divination die if Gale is a divination wizard, or if Karlach is going down the barbarian route, you have your reckless attack. Normally the divination would be enough, but sometimes it might be a particularly difficult roll and you can use both in that case. Oh, and did I forget the paladins? They love smiting and they love reactions, and having smite as a possible reaction means that you can save those spell slots for those crits and make sure that no one escapes your holy wrath as you really multiply up the damage. So combat is great for the most part. It's engaging and rewards tactical thinking. However, it does fall into the trap that anyone who has played XCOM 2 will be aware of, and that's the weirdness around the action economy. So the game isn't terribly difficult for the most part, but when you learn how to stack certain abilities, consumable items, and various interactions that allow for refunding of actions or granting extra actions, the game becomes very unbalanced. Like, some bosses that are made out to be powerful foes are laughable as you wipe them out in 1 or 2 turns by making use of, for example, potions of speed or haste. And with, say, a fighter who can already get 2 extra attacks per action point effectively, whether it be their bonus extra attack at level 11 or their use of action surge from level 2. It can all get quite silly. For example, my first playthrough I had Karlach as a berserker with some fire levels. For those who are interested, I did do a build video prior to release about this build, as well as an update video, and yes, it does work in the release version. So yeah, she uses her Battlemaster fighter levels to knock a boss prone, and then she can hit them a few times, use action surge to reset, and assuming you've already used your potion of speed or an ally can give you haste, you're getting a whole lot of attacks in. It is quite broken. Now for me, I played on normal for my first few playthroughs because I'm an unapologetic coward. But as I understand, tactician difficulty is also a joke if you have a basic understanding of how to maximize the action economy. And also remember, I'm no min-maxer. I was not aiming to make Karlach broken, nor that build broken. It just happened. The same happened with my Sorkadin and my Cleric Paladin as I was testing, and he can end up getting 3 smites in a turn. That's a whole lot of damage coming in. The basic point is, once you start stacking actions, reactions, and items, that is, the tools that the game gives you, things get broken fast in the mid to late game. This is not an issue per se, but be aware that the devs may need to rebalance some things. Progression systems. So as I've noted in the past, a key element of any role-playing game is how well it handles its progression systems. For Baldurs Gate 3, it boils down to class choice, and by extension leveling up, gear progression, and the Epilogue powers. I will handle the latter first. It's simple, you get special abilities or powers from your tadpole if you consume other tadpoles that you find in the game. It is an interesting concept, though I will mention in the next section it unfortunately lost its story-based consequences that were apparent in the early access version. Regardless, they are powerful, and they benefit different builds in different ways. For example, with Gale, who is likely to use concentration spells, benefits from this ability, allowing him to do a sudden burst of damage using his concentration. While for our own character, you obviously can pick whatever you think fits. Just note that they will make the game stupidly easy, so be aware. So overall, they are really interesting and powerful abilities, though for role-playing reasons you may choose to avoid them. But again, there are no real consequences for progressing them, just offhand comments you might receive. With that out of the way, the meat of the progression is found in the leveling up of classes. This is mostly great, as any role-playing game fan knows, especially a D&D orientated one, leveling up should be a notable thing that you strive towards. Baldurs Gate 3 manages to make its various classes feel distinct, and openly encourages multi-classing experimentation through its design. In fact, most of the classes favour it to some degree. Though leveling up is a crucial part of increasing your power, no matter what the level, like 5th edition that it is based on, it tries to make key levels such as level 5 and then level 10 as key power boost points with notable abilities. That is, the difference between a sorcerer, wizard or cleric with level 5 and 6 spells and one without them is night and day. So going all the way to level 12 without multiclass can be enjoyable once you get the pretty OP spells, yet I love that the game has made enough changes with key levels and the good design drawn from 5th edition, making for a brilliant multi-classing experience. I have personally used Sorcerer with Paladin levels, Cleric with Paladin, Warlock with Bard, and of course Fighter with Barbarian for some stupid damage potential. Basically, progressing through levels is enjoyable and is flexible. It empowers you, and I found myself getting a nice dose of dopamine every time I heard that level up sound effect with my character lighting up, and to me that means they nailed the level progression. Good leveling should be engaging, it grants purpose to the gameplay and makes you want to see your character reach max level. And did I mention that a good number of hours can be spent at max level in this game? This is no Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous where you gain your final mythic level like 20 minutes before the game ends. No, Baldurs Gate 3 wants you to be comfortably reaching max level early enough to get a feel for what a party at level 12 feels like and the carnage it brings. Overall, the leveling is a highlight of the game's systems and I very much approve of how it turned out. I have so many ideas I want to test out with the 12 levels across 12 great classes, so make sure to check out my channel if you want some build ideas. I will be doing a number of them and I've already done a few. When it comes to gear progression, the game takes a slow approach, as you can go much of the game without even filling every gear slot for each companion. While most builds do get several gears that encourage certain builds, it is a case of knowing where to look. So for your core armor AC, it is a factor, but know that AC doesn't increase drastically across tiers, at least not until you get to Act 3. That is, you can get away with basic armor if you have the right ability scores or attributes, depending on your class and various other considerations. What this means is the gear progression is more about getting item bonuses that complement your playstyle, which can be a rewarding experience. For example, getting Karlach Wrath from an item is always good, as she will undoubtedly be getting hit and thus will get a damage bonus. That is, Wrath gives a damage bonus when you've been hit. But there are other examples for, say, a monk, where they have many items that grant bonuses to unarmed attacks, which includes their Kai abilities. I'm still experimenting with the monk, but from what I've seen from other players, you can get some crazy power by combining the right gear with particular builds. To put it simply, if you're playing on normal difficulty as I have, the gear progression is quite relaxed, and the game is more focused on the class itself. But gear can be powerful if that is the goal, and the game makes sure that even if you don't like searching for specialized loot, the vendors you cannot miss during your campaign have a selection of good items for various builds, if you have the coin to spare. So overall, a decent gear progression throughout, but I appreciate that unlike some other RPGs, it does not lean too heavily on its equipment, and thank goodness it is not an MMO style system where gear is made obsolete every other level. My only issue is if you want to play Fashion Gate, there is no transmog system yet, but it has been promised. Yes, I want to have a monk in cool plate armor without any of the drawbacks, as poor monks are stuck just with the basic clothing. Story and world building. Just a heads up, this is a non-spoiler review, so I will not be talking about any story spoilers. Before I go into what the story and world building got right or wrong, I will give a quick non-spoiler synopsis, as understanding the starting foundation of the story will help to contextualize my points going forward. Also, feel free to check out my video on the background lore that I made before release, as it turns out it was quite spot on to what you should know about D&D's lore before going into the game. I will link it for those interested. So Baldurs Gate 3 finds the player character, whether it's an origin or a custom character, starting as a captive on a Mind Flayer colony ship, where you gain an unwanted occupant in your head in the form of a Mind Flayer tadpole. Before you manage to escape, the said colony ship is attacked by a group of Githyanki on dragons. Yet as the opening ends, you are alive. You know not what the Mind Flayers had planned for you, nor what the Githyanki were doing. But you do know that the Mind Flayer tadpole is a death sentence in normal circumstances. And you quickly meet other individuals that are the origin characters who are in the same predicament, with one of them also carrying a strange artifact. So you know you have to find out how to get rid of your malevolent passenger, and to add to matters you need to find out what the Absolute is, this being or person who is referenced by several characters early on as being connected to what appears to be a flood of tadpoled individuals infesting the coast. Yet none are changing into Mind Flayers, at least not yet. With that synopsis out of the way, the first thing I will say about the story is that it has several parallel plot lines that are all connected, and it rewards keeping track and doing some side areas to give clarity to what's going on, while also allowing for some interesting lore pieces. So you have the Epilogue related plot, the Absolute being and who or what they might be, and the Githyanki who are seemingly looking for something. Add in a whole Saluna Shar related subplot and a few wildcard groups and individuals, and it gets quite busy. For the most part, it works well, and certainly encourages engagement with the notable side paths and content that will expand your understanding, and it just so happens that each companion has some deep personal connection to one of the core plots that make up the main story. It is a storm of too many coincidences leading up to a crescendo, yet there lies the problem with the main plot. Its climax is wanting. That is, many of the threads get tangled in Act 3 and into the finale. It still works overall, but it feels messy to say the least. So yes, Baldurs Gate 3 suffers from what I'm calling the Act 3 curse of video game storytelling, that so many games suffer from due to rushed storytelling as they come to a close. With the best other example of a game that made me feel like this was that of The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. Like this game, there are out of character moments, side characters getting left by the wayside, with what feels like cut content waiting in the wings. Overall, it's a shame, but still enjoyable, if feeling a little disconnected. Which brings me to the finale. Obviously, no spoilers here, but know that the ending and epilogue, or lack thereof, is disappointing and very shoddy. It feels disconnected unfinished and leaves you a bit sad. Like, the game effectively cuts off just as the epilogue should start, as the game itself heavily implies you will fade to an epilogue screen or scene, but no, nothing happens, it just jumps right to a post-credits scene in effect. Also, the whole Epilogue question is bungled through the design decisions regarding its power usage. All I will say is early access had the right idea. The release version effectively chickens out, which harkens to the idea that Act 3 avoids consequences for your actions throughout the plot and comes down to pick your own ending with as much nuance as Mass Effect 3. Despite the thousands of endings claim, there is more like 4, which really is being generous with how similar they are. It's a shame, and it is why I would rank the story as such. Great concept, decent execution, and then face plants in Act 3 with the endings being very disappointing. Yet I will say this is not the end of the world, as much of these issues seem to be related to cut content, as there are indications that the epilogue section was cut shortly before release. And I imagine the devs may add some additions that will allow for this messy picture of an ending to feel more complete. You see, the Upper City, which was spoken about by the devs until weeks from release, both in interviews and in the Community Update 19, I believe, all indicating that the devs cut the Upper City section and then had to scramble to fit everything together. In doing so, it reduces Act 3 down a bit, and it shows. Just ask poor Karlach. Hashtag justice for Karlach. Anyway, as it stands, for any RPG not to at least have ending slides to compensate is outright sacrilege. So, great story journey, but with a bad ending. World building and story reactivity. So while the core story holds together for the most part and is intriguing, the other key ingredient for an RPG is the world itself, and simply put, it's great stuff. If you know anything about D&D lore or Baldurs Gate 1 and 2, you will see plenty of things ingrained in the world that help to bring the coast to life. The different groups, factions, individuals and their interactions, their own little side stories are all great to see. One moment you're getting a glimpse of druidic customs, goblin camp life, and the next the strict organisation of a Githyanki creche, or the serenity of a peaceful Myconid colony in the Underdark. And let's not forget the city itself, the namesake of the game series. It may have been disappointing that they cut the Upper City, again fingers crossed it's added later, but the Lower City with its familiar sights such as Sorcerer's Sundries and the Elf Song Tavern, and altogether the world does do its part in immersing you in the game as you pursue the main story. Yet the question then becomes, how reactive is the story and the world to your actions, as it's a key part of any role-playing game? This is more mixed. The first act has a large degree of reactivity and varied paths to go about your objectives. But then comes Act 2, which tapers off this aspect, and by Act 3 and then the conclusion, you are forced into a linear path mostly, and the game stops reacting to your decisions in any meaningful way beyond the immediate. Again, some of this has cut content written all over it. Like, you will do something and expect a response, as the dialogue suggests, but then it never happens. Like, the quest chain itself is half finished. One example I found involved a very direct threat by a character that implied they would seek out my camp. Yet, I have not seen that happen, even dozens of hours after the incident. It's a small thing, and maybe I'm missing something, but there are other examples linked into key plotlines that I have this feeling with. Overall, the game is more reactive than most, and Act 1 as an early access piece clearly benefited from it the most, but add in the no epilogues to round out the world state and the story elements and you end up with some poor reactivity overall, yet it's clearly fixable from where I'm standing. Visuals, audio and presentation. The game looks good. The variety of environments, armors, weapons, creatures, they all look good. The environments are of particular note as they not only look great, but the varied elevation not only adds a visual aspect but also assists in the gameplay as well. I do like the armor designs for the most part. They run from Dragon Age knockoffs to Skyrim practicality, but there is plenty to choose from. I just wish the barbarians got more clothing options, as having them wear monk clothes just does not sit well with me. I want to give a particular shout out to two armor sets that I really liked, that being the Shar Justiciar armor, which fits the Sharin motif perfectly, and the Totally Not a Mongolian Warlord armor in the Heavy Scale Armor 2. The game's magical effects are another major winner. There's nothing quite like watching necrotic damage turn someone into a husk or having Gale disintegrate someone, as well as a mention of the monk setting their hands and feet and weapon on fire in battle for my fellow followers of the Red God. Otherwise, the facial animations are mostly decent, though can be amusing as they seem to be a little bit over the top, but I do like that. While character animations in general are well done, and I do like the fact that different races get different movement sets, which adds a lot to the presentation, so credit to the animation team for that. Aside from that, I will also mention the UI, or user interface, which for you console fans will of course be different, but as far as the PC version is concerned, I am aware that many people are not fans of it, and I do agree that the inventory management could still be improved. It is still quite tedious, but I do like the UI overall, and the fact that I can customize the ability bar as I see fit and keep everything neat and tidy, I do appreciate that. All the information I need is there, and I had no issues using the various interfaces throughout the game, so overall to me it's a decent UI, but again, inventory management in these games is always tedious. Which then brings us to the audio. So first I will mention that it seems that Will and Karlach have some audio issues, but also some of the other companions from time to time. It seems that their audio can sometimes be a bit on the quiet side, and it feels like they're distant as well from the actual source of the noise. That is, you'll be looking at your companion, but their voice will seem to be 10 feet away from them. Not a major problem, but it was particularly noticeable in Act 1 for me. Otherwise, the audio is great, the voice work is brilliant, and all the companions, villains, and characters in general have done a fantastic job with this. And it does so much to elevate the conversations in this game, so credit to the entire voice cast. And regarding the returning characters from Baldurs Gate 1 and 2, I think that Jaheira and Minsk were both well done. Jaheira in particular was brilliant, her voice fits her personality perfectly. Otherwise, the soundtrack is great. Borislav Slavov did a great job. The standout one for me was a short one that you only hear once that I will not spoil here, but you will know it when it comes. It's a very powerful scene as a result, and the soundtrack is great there. With that said, it all comes together for a great presentation. Sure, there are little bugs here and there in the presentation from time to time, but with great voice, music, animations, and a breathtaking environment, you have ticked all the boxes for great presentation in my opinion. Bugs, performance, and other issues. The game is not as buggy as I expected. In fact, Act 1 is where I noticed most bugs related to the audio, which I mentioned earlier, with some of them seeming like oversights, like with the weird volume for audio with the companions, such as Will in particular, where he also switches between his old and new voice when selecting him or using him in combat. Otherwise, I had no game-breaking bugs, but I know some players in Act 3 had bugs that prevented quest progression, so be aware that you may have some issues. I know with the recent hotfixes, they have addressed some of the Act 3 major quest bugs, particularly with Minfara as I understand, but I haven't tested it myself yet. Honestly though, my most hated bug was not so much a bug, but again an oversight, that having characters with wild shape is annoying in conversations to say the least. Like, Jaheira, I love you, but having my head poking through an owlbear's feathers during a key story moment / reveal was amusing but incredibly annoying. Otherwise, I had a few other amusing bugs, with one where Lae'zel for some reason becomes T-posed and starts phasing in and out of space rapidly. It would appear that those gift psionics manifest in unusual ways apparently. So there are bugs, but not nearly as much as I expected, but be aware of Act 3. And again, my issue with Act 3 is less bugs and more how it's set up. It is messy because of aforementioned cut content. For performance, it's fine for the most part. My old 2060 Super with a 10th gen i5 has no problem doing max settings. Of course, I'm only running at 1080p, so there's that caveat. Though do be aware that Baldurs Gate itself is the only area that I had severe issues with performance, but even then it was usually only dropping the frames into the 40s and for the most part was fine. So giving my average system, it seems to run relatively well. Of course, there are lots of graphics options you can use. Of course, I was using DLSS, so you can always tweak things if you have an issue. Again, I can't speak as to the console version's performance. As for other issues, again, only major thing is Act 3 feeling messy, so expect bugs and weirdness, and weird quest pacing, but Act 1 and 2 have no major issues. The verdict. As with all of my reviews, there will be no quote-unquote objective numbers rating here. As to me, such a claim of absolute authority of what makes something good or bad is quite ridiculous. Instead, I will be giving you a very much subjective opinion on a few key elements that I think make or break a game. The value proposition. Does this game offer a good amount of enjoyable gameplay or entertainment for the price point asked? So a normal campaign of Baldurs Gate 3 will run you anywhere between 60 and 100 hours, depending on how much side content you do. This is the thing with this game, even though it clearly has missing notable content in its final act, the overall package is still a great deal as I see it, even as a full-priced game. Considering you're getting a good 50 hours of Act 1 and 2 at largely very high quality with some caveats of course, I cannot deny the value here. You are paying for an expansive adventure including 12 fully fleshed out classes, a great combat system and a ridiculous amount of side content, as well as core content. So basically there is no way this game is not a steal at a retail asking price. I paid £40 for it back in the early access and I don't regret it one bit. Does it run well? This simply refers to whether it maintains a good 60 frames per second, which to me is necessary for a good gaming experience on PC, but also does it crash often? This is great for the most part. I had 2 crashes over about 120 hours of playing for this video, which is great for a game of this size. As for the performance on my old 2060 Super with a 10th generation i5 processor, it ran at a solid 60 frames at largely high settings with DLSS of course, and it had no issues. The only performance issues were found in Baldurs Gate itself later on, and even then it was usually a temporary drop that corrected itself after about 10 seconds, so it runs great. Simple. Is it replayable? This is a very important aspect of any game, but especially in the case of a role-playing game. There are two sides to this aspect. First, the game gives you 12 great classes, multiclassing, a variety of companions and play styles, as well as a first act that allows for multiple clear routes to complete it. And though the amount of varied routes declines as the game goes on, there's still a lot of reasons to replay this game. On the other hand, as it stands, the endings and the epilogue are disappointing. I feel that they take away from the replayability, as I'm not keen on playing through 50 plus hours to get another disappointing ending with little changes. It becomes a case of the journey versus the destination. The journey is great and replaying it is worth it. Just be aware that the destination is lackluster. If you think that the journey is what matters, which I'm inclined to lean towards myself, then it's got great replayability. Goodness, I'm one of those guys who still occasionally replays the Mass Effect trilogy only to be disappointed every time, as I am a glutton for punishment. So great replayability despite everything. So considering all of those, overall, is it a good game and is it worth a look? Well, it's a great game. Just be aware that the third act is messy and the endings and epilogue need some work. But even still, you're getting a massive adventure with lots to enjoy and so much charm, with some great game design principles that feel like a shot in the arm for RPG enjoyers. Even at the full retail price, it's a great deal and I would recommend it. Fingers crossed that they improve the latter parts of the game in the future. That would definitely elevate this game to a gaming milestone. With that said, remember, if you liked this video, be sure to comment, rate and subscribe. Also check out my channel if you want to see my Baldurs Gate 3 lore overview if you want some insight before you play, and also some build ideas, as well as videos covering Elder Scrolls, Mass Effect and now Starfield, so check it out if you're interested. Otherwise, please have a great day and thanks for watching.